We are starting a series on the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer is a small little prayer. It's 57 words long, total of 57 words. And yet, in those 57 words, you will see that everything that needs to concern us is addressed. Jesus, in 57 words, revealed his perfect wisdom in giving us a prayer in 57 words that says everything we need. And so the problem with a prayer that is 57 words long and a prayer that we've had for 2,000 years is sometimes we become a little overly familiar with it. Perhaps we have become a little bit tired of it. It feels, old school. And we don't recognize the treasure that it is. And so that is why I want to put ourselves into this series to really grasp the profound, earth-changing, gospel-unleashing power of the Lord's Prayer. We're calling this series Living in the Vision of Jesus, because that's really what the Lord's Prayer is. And we're going to get into that as we go. This week is kind of an introductory week to the Lord's Prayer, so we're going to survey the whole prayer. But I want to start with this question that I think hits all of us at different times. It hits us at different stages of our life. It hits us when we're youth. It hits us in our college years. It hits us when we start our family. It hits us in the workplace. It hits us as we get into our retirement years. And that's this question. Do you know your purpose? Do you know your purpose? As we get hit with that question, there are sometimes three different answers that come to us as we are hit with the question, do you know your purpose? And I will admit I have gone through all three of these. But sometimes when you hear that question, do you know your purpose? You kind of stutter and you realize you don't know your purpose. You are a person who has no clear purpose. Next slide, please. Next slide. Some may say that they have no purpose. In fact, only 25% of people in our country answered a recent nationwide survey that they had a clear sense of what their purpose in life was. 25%. 75% had no idea. Acutely amongst our young adults, amongst those who are 18 to 25, in 2023, Harvard released a survey, and they discovered that 58% of our young adults have an utter lack of any sense of meaning or purpose in their lives. That within the last month, they had asked the question, do I have a meaning? Do I have a purpose? And this is the generation that is growing up amongst us. They have come into a world where they have no grasp of a purpose or a meaning for their life. When we struggle with a purpose, we are in a crisis. And the crisis of having no purpose is a deep sense of lostness. Journal Emotion Matters described what it means to struggle with a lack of purpose. They described it this way. If you are experiencing a lack of purpose in your life, you may feel constantly bored, dissatisfied, or empty, like life has no meaning. You may feel unfulfilled in your relationships with others, disaffected at home and at work, and find yourself anxiously ruminating at what the point of life is. Those words resonate. I've been in stages of life where I've been there. The lack of purpose can rot your soul. Well, that's going to fall and break. But then there's a second group that I want to talk about. A second group is maybe those people who, yes, they have a purpose, but is it the right purpose? Are they living for the right thing? I would submit to you that many struggle not with no purpose, but with the wrong purpose. That we have been drawn into this idea that our purpose is our job, Our purpose is personal success. Our job is being the best mom or the best dad. Our purpose is having, beautiful kids. Maybe our purpose is our hobbies. Our purpose is to shave 1 or 2 strokes off of our golf game. Maybe our purpose is just to get done and retire and have the good life. And everything we're trying to do is to get us to the finish line where we can finally have our days. And if that's something that we've been sucked into, and I've been in stages of life where I've been sucked into this, well, the crisis of that answer is that you're ultimately wasting your life. I was convicted in my college years by a book by John Piper, who wrote a book titled Don't Waste Your Life. And he provides a riveting illustration. But he says this. He says, I will show you how to waste your life. Consider a story from the February 1998 edition of Reader's Digest, which tells us about a couple who took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago, when he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells. Tragically, this was the dream. Come to the end of your life and let the last great work of your life before you give an account to your Creator be this: playing softball and collecting shells. Picture them before Christ at the great day of judgment. Look, Lord, see my shells. You see, that is a purpose wasted. That is a purpose that has missed the big adventure of life and has bought into this dream that if I die with the most stuff, I win. Or if I die with the best stuff, or if I live the most comfortable life, that's my purpose. And it forgets that you're made for so much more. But then there's a third group of people that may face that question, do you know your purpose? And they may say, yeah, I do know my purpose, but you know what? Life has absolutely crushed me. I am off track. I started with a great purpose. I started with a great vision for my life, and then the bills came. And then the health issues came. And then life started bombarding me with responsibilities. And my life has just been utterly disrupted. It's been stalled. It's off course. And those people that answer the question about their purpose, they have an inner sense of defeat. It reminds me of an old movie. So old Marlon Brando was in it, and Marlon Brando was attractive, called On the Waterfront. Hey, you know how old that was? On the Waterfront is this movie about a bunch of people that work at a shipping yard, and Marlon Brando's character's name is Terry, and he's kind of brought into a family of crime. And it's that scene where he's sitting in the back talking to his brother Charlie, and his brother Charlie is asking him to take the fall, and Terry is weeping, and he's explaining to Charlie that he had a chance in this life. He was a fighter, but that Charlie said, you need to take a fall, when it was his chance to shine. And that's where in the movie you get this famous line, I could have been somebody. And you can tell that his life was disrupted. His life was robbed from him. His sense of purpose. He had lived for the rest of his life feeling empty inside. And so that's the kind of person who feels like their purpose has just been stalled or taken from them. Do you relate to any of these stories? The sense of having no purpose, the sense of having too small of a purpose, of the wrong purpose, or having your purpose just kind of pulled away from you? Do you want different? Do you want a different answer? A better answer to what is your purpose? Well, that is what we want to get into today, because what we are going to learn today is you have a great purpose. You have a great purpose. You want to know what your purpose is? It's right here in the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer is Jesus' vision for this world. Right in the middle of this prayer, he says, for it to be on earth as it is in heaven. That's Jesus' purpose statement. That's Jesus' big mission. And that is our invitation, because he gives that to us as a prayer. He says, I want you to be partners in the great mission of making it on earth as it is in heaven. Pray with me these things. If you pray with me these things, if you live for these things in this prayer, you will have a great purpose of seeing it be on earth as it is in heaven. You see, that's what I want to do today, is as we have gotten overly used to the Lord's Prayer, I want us to look at it afresh. I want us to look at it new. I want us to recognize that first and foremost, the Lord's Prayer is a vision of heaven. It's a vision of heaven. You see, the Lord's Prayer reveals our purpose. And what is our purpose? We are to live for heaven. We are to live for heaven. And that's what the Lord's Prayer is here to guide us in doing. So, if that's our purpose, that we are to live for heaven, where do we begin? If we are to live for heaven, we must know what heaven is. And here's where I want to really pull the blinders off of the Lord's Prayer. I want us to go through the Lord's Prayer today to recognize what it truly is. The Lord's Prayer is 6 glimpses of heaven. 6 glimpses of heaven. It's going to tell us that heaven is the beauty of holiness, that heaven is the reign of righteousness, that heaven is the joy of obedience, that heaven is the freedom from every anxiety, that heaven is the fullness of peace and fellowship, and that heaven is the triumph over all evil. That's what the Lord's Prayer tells us heaven is. And so I want us to go through this passage and dwell on these 6 glimpses to grasp the vision of Jesus, to know what heaven is, so that we can identify our purpose appropriately as living for heaven. So let's go through these glimpses. The first glimpse that we have here in the Lord's Prayer is that heaven is the beauty of holiness. The beauty of holiness. The first thing Jesus wants us to pray is, Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Now, the Lord's Prayer shows up in Matthew chapter 6. It shows up in a section where Jesus starts addressing the practices of piety of the religious people in Israel. And he goes through fasting, he goes through tithing, and then he focuses on prayer, because prayer is one of the acts of faith that we are most supposed to practice. And he recognizes that many people pray for the wrong reasons. They pray to bring attention upon themselves. But he is teaching them in the Lord's Prayer that true prayer is God-centered. True prayer is forgetting the self and falling in love with God's will and God's way, of bringing yourself to God to allow God to bring himself to you. And so the very first thing that Jesus teaches us to pray is for the Chiefs to win. No? I'm sorry, my notes are wrong here. No, the very first thing that Jesus teaches people to pray has nothing to do with anything in your life. It has to do with God, right? And it says, hallowed be your name. The first thing we are to do is to direct our thoughts and our attention to the holiness of God. Now, what is holiness? Holiness has a bad rap in our world. Holiness is kind of attached to those people who say, don't drink, don't chew, and don't go out with the girls that do, right? That's the ick of holiness, right? These people that kind of slap down any ideas of fun and dress and act better than you, and all these different things. So holiness has this connotation of just kind of being fussy. And there is an aspect of holiness that deals with ethical purity. But the true heart of the meaning of holiness is apartness. is God's apartness from everything else. Now, apartness isn't something that, really gets your mind excited. But when we set something apart, we are saying it's special. So apartness is really saying extreme specialness. Holiness is extreme specialness. Holiness is what we would call beautiful, where everything just kind of stops, and you're like, I don't want to spoil this. It's beautiful. It's special. And so holiness is beauty. It's specialness. We've all had what we would call holy moments. I remember one of my holy moments was my wedding day, when I turned around and my wife, dressed in this beautiful white gown and this veil, comes to me. It's so pure. It's so special. It's so irrepeatable. That was a holy moment. The holy moment when I held my babies for the very first time. I got to see this precious life and recognize this fullness of responsibility and this fullness of love. I mean, these were those extremely holy moments. They were maximally special and beautiful. But as we look at the earth, as we look at the world around us, specialness is in short supply, right? What is special in this world? We are taught to love the same things, to all drive the same cars, to basically be conformed over and over and over again, to look and think and be all the same. There is very little specialness. It's all packaged. It's all got a QR code or a barcode, and it all goes in your trash can. I mean, so much of this world becomes waste. I can't believe it, but every week we fill a 50-gallon drum of trash. I mean, what is all of this? It's because everything that we have in this world is ultimately trash-bound. Very little is special. And so I believe many of us have in our heart this yearning, where is the special? Where is the beautiful? I love the philosopher priest John O'Donohue, who said this. He says, the human soul is hungry for beauty. We seek it everywhere, in landscape, music, art, clothes, furniture, gardening, companionship, love, religion, and in ourselves. But the Lord's Prayer says, hallowed be your name on earth as it is in heaven. So what Jesus is saying is, right now, you can't see it, but in heaven, God's name is hallowed. This specialness, this beauty, this holiness of God is radiating beyond all imagination. We're told in Psalm 29:2, give unto the Lord the glory due to his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. You see, if our eyes could be lifted out of the muck of the present world that we are in, and we could behold God as he is, we would say, beautiful. Beautiful. So beautiful you would fear your life because it would almost destroy you as you behold him in his holiness. You see, God's presence is holy. It is supremely beautiful. It is inexpressibly special. This is heaven, is to see God, is to see his true beauty, to see his infinite glory. You see, when we yearn for beauty, we're really yearning for God's face. Donahue continues his quote to say, we feel most alive in the presence of the beautiful, for it meets the needs of our soul. As you feel this draw towards beauty, I am telling you, you are being drawn towards heaven. You are being drawn towards God and his holiness. And we can see this beauty while we are here on earth because we can see this beauty in Jesus. Do you remember that story, the night before Jesus was to be betrayed? And he was having dinner, and then the woman comes with the alabaster flask, and she sees Jesus, and she recognizes that this one good thing, this one beautiful thing, this precious heirloom that cost more than a year's salary, probably a decade's worth of salary, she said, this is the moment. This is what I have this nard for. And she breaks it open so that it can only be used once to fill the room with the expression of her extravagant desire to express to Jesus, you are beautiful. You are inexpressibly special. I want you to have all that I have. I want you to enjoy my very best. You see, in Jesus, we see the beauty of holiness. He is heaven when we see him. The second thing we see, heaven is the reign of righteousness. Jesus then says, your kingdom come. Your kingdom come. Are you hearing more and more just a cry for justice in this world? Just an anger that the right things are not being done, that oppression is rampant, that the taking advantage of people in this way and that way is everywhere. And we seem to just be in an unsolvable puzzle that keeps injustice alive and perpetuating itself. It is so twisted into the fabric of society that you can hardly escape it. We feel this cry for justice. Why are so many people hungry? Why are so many people without homes? Why are so many people afraid of violence? You see, we live on earth, and this world is broken. There is corruption and favoritism and injustice. And then we say, well, whose fault is that? Then we look at ourselves. We're broken. We're favorite makers. We're corrupt. We're always choosing ourselves over fair all the time. We are agents of injustice. We don't love our neighbor as ourselves. We always love ourselves a little better, right? That's the whole idea. We don't look at the planks in our own eyes. We just point out everyone else's. We don't accept faults. We get lawyers. This is us too. We live in this world where justice is right in our own eyes. But you know what the Bible calls living by what's right in your own eyes? It calls that the heart of sin. That's the heart of sin. So we live in a world that cries for justice, and yet we contribute to the injustice. Well, what is the kingdom then? Jesus says, pray for the kingdom. The kingdom is the rule of righteousness. Again, Jesus says, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. In heaven, righteousness reigns. Listen to Psalm 11, verses 4 through 7. The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes see, his eyelids test the children of man. The Lord is righteous. He loves righteous deeds. The upright shall behold his face. You see, in heaven, righteousness reigns right now. There's no cry for injustice in heaven because righteousness reigns perfectly. We can see this righteous reign in Jesus. I remember that story. It's told to us in Matthew chapter 12, but Jesus goes to the synagogue and he sees a man with the withered hand. We read this passage in Matthew 12, verses 9 to 13. Let me read it for us. Jesus went on from there and entered their synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" So they might accuse him. You see, in the synagogue, there were people who had an opportunity to talk to Jesus and to learn from Jesus, and their desire was to condemn Jesus. They were looking for a way to get him to commit a good act and call it unjust. We have in the synagogue injustice, twisting the law. And we have this man with a withered hand who has not seen any justice. He has lived with this corruption of his body, unable to do the work that he needs to do to survive, unable to live in the society as a full member because of this deformity. He has suffered injustice because of his withered hand day in and day out. And the people are not interested in this man experiencing justice because their hearts are twisted. The story goes on. He said to them, "Which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath?" Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out and was restored, healthy like the other. You see, Jesus came into an unjust system, and he brought justice. And what was his justice? It was compassion. It was healing. It was restoration. This man, for the first time, experienced justice, and it was through Jesus. The third thing that heaven is, as we look at these glimpses, is the joy of obedience. Jesus then says, "Your will be done." Now, I think this is pretty much a universal truth. We all want to be good, but we all also want to be happy, and we all want to have fun. And for some reason, in every single one of our hearts is the same lie that Eve fell for in the garden, which is that doing God's will is somehow going to keep you from something better. There is in our heart a cleavage between being good and being happy. There's a proverb that says, this is the proverb of folly, that says, "Stolen water is sweet." And you hear that proverb and you're like, I want to try that water. What is it about that water? That stolen water sounds pretty good. Let me have some of that stolen water. And there's something in us that wants something we can't have. We see the good, the joy, the happiness, the fun as being outside of God's will. We immerse ourselves in movies and TV shows that have gotten so slick at showing us how much fun it is to dabble in sinfulness. The affair is always better than the wife. Right? This is shown to us again and again. Stealing is okay if you can get away with it. We enjoy a little bit of sin as we watch these shows. You know, people will say, if you want to have fun, you have to raise a little hell. And there's a part of us like, yeah, you know, a little bit's not bad. But we live in this world, we live in this mindset that joy is not in, or happiness is not in obedience, it's in disobedience. And yet we all live in the misery of making that choice. We all live in the misery of the consequences of us trying to have fun that breaks God's will. We're all dealing with those consequences. They don't need to be listed. But in heaven, Jesus says, as it is in heaven, there is the joy of obedience. Look at Psalm 103. It says this in verse 20. It says, "Bless the Lord, O you his angels, you mighty ones who do his words, obeying the voice of his word. Bless the Lord, all his hosts, his ministers who do his will." Who is Jesus saying is most blessed in this passage? Who is God saying is most blessed? His angels. His angels live in a state of eternal, perpetual blessedness. And what is their blessedness? It is that they are living continually to do the will of God. You see, beings that are far more capable than us have found that the essence of joy is in the presence of God doing his will. And so in heaven, there is the joy of obedience. I love this little verse that comes out of Luke chapter 15, and at the end of these parables about the lost coin and the lost sheep, where Jesus says, "Just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents." You want to know what brings the magnificent beings of heaven into a state of joy? It's to see us obey. It's to see us finally learn God is good. Turn to him. You see, there is joy in heaven, and it comes through obedience, not through disobedience. Obedience is the currency of heaven's joy. And we can see this joyful obedience in Jesus. He tells his disciples on his last night in John 15, "If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full." Jesus is telling us that he experienced the fullness of joy. He experienced joy without measure, and his joy was in the fact that he lived to do his Father's will. That's Jesus, living in the joy of obedience. Do you want to know how great is the joy of Jesus' obedience? Hebrews 12:2 says something shocking. It says, "Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross." What is that saying? That the joy of being with his Father, of seeing the joy of his Father in his Son, who laid down his life and lived a perfect life, that joy made the suffering and agony of the cross worthwhile. Get me back into the joy of heaven. Get me back into the joy of your face. I will go through the cross. That is how great is the joy that Jesus is offering. It is a joy that you would say, I would suffer my life for it. We don't know that kind of joy in this world, do we? But that is the joy that Jesus wants his disciples to have. And that is the joy that is in heaven. It is the joy of obedience. Now, fourth, what is heaven? Heaven is the freedom from every anxiety. Now Jesus moves to a petition that says, "Give us this day our daily bread." And you can see a clear transition. We've gone from talking about God to now talking about our needs and our concerns. And we'll talk about, we deal with God first, and then we deal with us. But there is this transition here. You know, Jesus knows about this world. Life is hard. As I get older, I was like, why is everything so hard? Life is expensive. Everything costs so much money. And life gets more and more fragile. Like your ankles just stop working in the morning. What's that about? Right? Your needs multiply. There's so many things that you have to take care of. Your pill drawer just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And oh my goodness, is there not too many things in this world to worry about? I mean, the only thing that we can do to stop worrying is just to turn away from it. But we have our kids, we have our parents, we have our own jobs, we have our friends, we have all of this news. There is so much to worry about. I mean, don't you yearn for just a moment to be free from want? Just to step out of having to have so many needs and being so fragile. But here's the thing, the Lord's Prayer, again, as it is in heaven, there is no anxiety, there is no need, there is no lack. Listen to this scene from heaven in the book of Revelation, chapter 7, verses 15. It says, therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. You see, in heaven is the place where we have nothing to worry about. Heaven is the place where we have no lack. Heaven is the place where everything is good and our life is safe and we do not need to be afraid. But we can also see this freedom from anxiety in Jesus. We could just go to that passage where he's got the crowd of 5,000 and they're all hungry and all they can find is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But Jesus reveals what it is to live this petition, give us this day our daily bread, because he turns to heaven, he prays, and he serves the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes so that everybody is satisfied. Everybody is satisfied. And not only are they satisfied, they leave with an abundance, 12 basketfuls of food. We can see this freedom from anxiety in Jesus. Next, we look at the 5th glimpse. Heaven is the fullness of peace and fellowship. Jesus then says in our prayer, we are to pray, forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. In the world, oh my, we live in conflict. We live in division. We live with schisms and rivalries. We have animosity. We deal with racism. We have wars in this world going on all of the time. In our own families, we have conflicts. We have apologies that we just can't give. And we have forgivenesses that we just can't say. In our own families, we deal with irreconcilable conflict. Don't you yearn for peace? You see, what Jesus is showing us in this petition is where forgiveness and reconciliation has full effect, there is perfect peace and fellowship. And that's why this petition also is a picture of heaven. Because when you go to the 5th chapter of Revelation, we are seeing the peace and fellowship that exists in heaven. Revelation 5:9 says, by your blood you ransom people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them a kingdom of priests to our God. Do you see what that means? It means all of the divisions, all of the conflicts, all of the racial strifes that exist in this world, they are nixed and covered and canceled in the blood of Jesus. There is forgiveness and reconciliation amongst peoples that have been in conflict for hundreds of years because of the power of the forgiveness and the peace of Jesus. And we see this peace in Jesus when there were Romans and there were Jews and they were full of anger at the Son of God, so much so that they put him upon a cross and were enjoying watching him breathe his last. We saw in Jesus heaven on earth. Because upon that cross, he looked at the Romans and the Jews and all of these people who hated. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You see, in Jesus is the picture of peace and fellowship that the Lord's Prayer shows us exists in heaven. And the sixth glimpse is this triumph over all evil. Last, Jesus says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Here again, we face our frailty. We have an enemy within called temptation. We have an enemy within that is constantly saying, nobody's looking. We have an enemy within that says, just click. We have an enemy within that says, what's this gossip going to hurt? It's really juicy. And we fall for it again and again. But we also have an enemy without. We also have the evil one. We have one that Peter says is like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, looking at every moment at where we are weak, where we are vulnerable, where we are isolated, and bringing his attack, ready to sift us like wheat. And so we have enemies that we cannot deliver ourselves from. We are never free from the lure of sin and the attacks of the evil one. But heaven is. That's what's so beautiful about heaven. Heaven is free from temptation and free from the evil one. In Revelation chapter 12, we are told that Satan was defeated and there was no longer any place for him in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. We are told that heaven is the place where God has triumphed over all evil. They have been thrown down. They have no power. There is no temptation. There is no evil. There is no way to fall. In heaven, there is perfect security in the righteous reign of God. And we can see this triumph over evil in Jesus, who after suffering on that cross, after experiencing the temptations of the crowd saying, take yourself down, save yourself if you really are the Messiah, who faced the evil one, who was there working amongst all of these people to destroy Jesus. We see before he dies him declare these words, it is finished. Not he is finished. Temptation and the evil one did not get the victory. As he died, he got the victory by destroying the power of sin and death. Because at his last breath, the curtain, the separation between God and man was torn in two from top to bottom. The serpent was crushed when Jesus gave his life on the cross. So as we look at the Lord's Prayer afresh, we see that it is a picture of heaven. And what is heaven? Heaven is the beauty of holiness. It is the reign of righteousness, the joy of obedience, the freedom from every anxiety, the fullness of peace and fellowship, the triumph over all evil. Now let me ask you, what would your life be like if this prayer became your vision? If this prayer became your purpose, that you were committed to living for heaven. It is because of how compelling this vision is that we are going to devote the next 7 weeks to truly exploring how all of these petitions form us into citizens of heaven, ambassadors for Jesus, that truly have the power to change the world. Are you ready to live for heaven? I have two starting places. If you say, yes, I am ready to live for heaven. The first is to believe in Jesus. Believe in Jesus. I mean, believe in Jesus as the one who is the vision of heaven. You see, Jesus is the one who hallows God's name. He is the one who brings the reign of righteousness. He is the one who fulfills God's will. He is the daily bread of all of his people. He is our forgiveness. He is our deliverance from temptation and the evil one. Jesus is this prayer. Turn to Jesus, put your heart in Jesus, and you have the vision of heaven, and his name is Jesus, living in you, working to change you, working to make you in his image. And then the second place that we can start is to work together to truly pray the Lord's Prayer, to commit to making the Lord's Prayer not just an ancient prayer, but a living prayer that we see our vision and purpose in. And so we have created these little bookmarks, which are on the back. I hope you pick them up. But what it does is it takes the Lord's Prayer, which has 7 parts in it, and it divides those parts up into 7 daily prayers so that you can pray through the Lord's Prayer once a week. But within each one of those parts, there's a handful of bullet items that we can pray to truly expand and live in what Jesus wants us to be praying about. And so my request is that Renew seeks to be a church where the gospel's power to make all things new is experienced. And we do that for this next season by joining together in this project of praying through the Lord's Prayer. So please pick up one of these bookmarks in the back and let's begin to pray the Lord's Prayer, not as an old prayer, but as a prayer filled with the power and vision of Jesus. Amen?